Thank you for joining us. This is Brave New History. I'm here with Nathan. He has the YouTube channel Spiritual Level of Being. We'll say a Gnostic enthusiast, an adept. And we'll talk about the idea of two Pauls. So my understanding of the idea is the Paul we read in Acts and the Pauline epistles, we're really conflating two Pauls, right?
Yes.
So very much a minority opinion. I'm kind of partial to the idea because of Dr. Price. You know, he has the Paul and Simon Magus idea, which I find fascinating. I'm not personally convinced. It's also like, I think he might be the only one to hold to it, but the insane,
not many.
What's that?
There's a couple others, but not many.
Okay, well, there we go. So it's not as crazy as it might seem at first. And it's incredible.
It was also,
parallels.
you might like this, back in the medieval times, when you had early Christian apologists, and they were actually arguing against this. So this is an early claim, something that Dr. Price didn't actually mention, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
I've actually forgot the very first Christian apologist, but I think that's around the 2nd or 3rd century is the very first one. There's a writing of it that's actually been removed from the Bible. So
how's that?
Yeah, it was actually a document that's sort of been removed from the Bible or wasn't added in, rejected, but it was actually written by the very first Christian apologist, which is pretty interesting. I've got a copy in one of the books written by I forgot his name now. Shit, I'm just going to go quickly cut the book. It's Lost Scriptures. Bart D. Ehrman. I remembered. I don't need the book no more.
Okay.
But yeah, he wrote down that. He wrote down Lost Scriptures, and you can come across all different scriptures that were rejected and removed from the Bible. You also come across even letters of Paul that have been rejected. So it's quite interesting. There are many writings of Paul. And if you want to go on to the two Pauls, you have two different messengers in the sense where Dr. Price also points out this as well with Paul. Paul spoke in tongues, and a lot of Christians were jealous in that sense. And he said, no, it doesn't matter if I can just speak in tongues, because it's like your toe, your big toe. Do you remove your big toe? Like, it's got a purpose. So you still have a purpose. You're a fish amongst the sea. So he was arguing, don't be jealous of me, find your truth and follow, the words of Christ. But the interesting thing about Paul is you have two different messages as well. You have one Paul that's focused on converting the Jews, and then you have another Paul that's solely focused on converting the Gentiles. And that one that was converting the Gentiles was the Gnostic Paul that has later been labeled as a heretic. So the Catholic Church has sort of mingled in these two Pauls, put the heretic as Gnostic, and the one who was hunting down earlier Christians and also Jews, who was focused on the Jewish group, as the rightful Paul, as Saul. But the Ebionites, the Essenes, and early Gnostics disliked this Paul. But however, the Essenes didn't mind this other Paul, who was a Gnostic. So the Essenes and Gnostics somewhat got along, but Essenes also thought the Gnostics were wrong, and Gnostics also thought Essenes were wrong in these early groups. But Paul's very sexist as well. But in a sense, this doesn't make sense because Paul had a female follower, Thelsla. He had a couple of female followers. So these two different ideals have merged into one. And another interesting thing is Simon Magus is eventually made an opponent of Paul and eventually made an opponent of Peter. And they call him an evil magician. But in reality, Simon Magus actually was a friend of Peter and even followed Peter. So a lot of these stories have really been full mixed in, a bit of sexism and ultimately change. But yeah, both stories have all been mingled in. A bit of Simon Magus, a bit of Paul, and a bit of this other Paul. So ultimately, we're not really going to find out the 100% truth because even the writings aren't actually by Paul himself. So it's interesting. It's like none of the Gospels are written by any of the disciples. They're mostly written in Greek, and you have some that have been removed, written in Coptic and Syriac. And ones that were translated in Aramaic were translated from Greek into Aramaic. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So this Paul persecuting Christians, like, where would you take it where he eventually converts to Christianity?
Well, I see this one as more like in with the bed with the Romans, in a sense. So politically motivated, I would say. Where the other Paul was more as a Gnostic lot. But I would say some of these stories have really come in the late 2nd century and 3rd century and then really mingled in. So it's hard to pinpoint an actual sort of date or this sort of stuff, especially with the constant rewriting, censorships, and extra stories added in. Like even the word magician, eventually that actually meant magi, which were the Zoroastrians. So you got this text of him being a magician. You got some saying he's a sorcerer. So it's quite interesting there. But even the story of the 3 wise men, if you notice, there's no 3, it's just 3 gifts, and it just says magi, Zoroastrians. So it shows that there must be some importance if you have another faith going there following this man as well.
Yeah.
So
you'd put that as historical, the magi?
I'd say yes, somewhat yes. I'd say some of it's a bit of most of it would be myth. I'd say that some magi met him, and the executions of kids didn't happen. That's bullshit with Herod and stuff like that. So a lot of it's myth based as well, and this could also just be myth as well. I accept this, and the reason why I say that, and this could be just a way of explaining why the Zoroastrians were following Yeshua, because there were Greeks following Yeshua. He could speak in Greek. He could speak many languages. When that girl was going to be stoned, he wrote in the sand. So it shows he had knowledge of speaking, and you got scriptures removed from the Bible that said he knew Hebrew and Greek. So then you got stories saying he knew Indian, Greek, and even Coptic and Syriac. So it's hard to say. He was educated, and it wouldn't surprise me if he knew Coptic, because Coptic back then was a really big trade language between the Jews and Greeks and Egyptians. So if they couldn't speak each other's language, that was a little go-to language of trade. So that's why some of the Coptic writings are older, which is pretty interesting.
So the main reason for believing that there's 2 Pauls that were kind of condensed into one, I can kind of see that, where it seems he's a little bit schizophrenic, right? Where he says genital mutilation is the worst thing in the world. You are going to hell, right? It puts you under the law. You'll be condemned.
And then in sometimes he was for chastity as well. He was against sex as well in some teachings. So you have 2 opposite meanings. 2 opposite teachings.
Yeah. Well, and then there's, where is it in Acts that he consents to somebody being genitally mutilated, which the Paul I'm thinking of from the epistles would never do that. He would do everything he could to stop that, right?
Yes.
And then, well, he's always against. Is there portions where he's not against sex?
In some Gnostic teachings, I guess it's about all, and they're more for the birth in a sense, and that's through the spirit in a sense. But all the messages are very different. So it's even with the Gnostic writings, there was never one group of Gnostics. It was always different, because it really refers to ones in the know, and the religious side really the Gnostic Christian side come in after Yeshua's death, and even after James. So yeah, you had many different groups during the times of the apostles, and the reason why is the apostles all had their own view. They all had their own belief. And this is one reason in the Gospels that Jesus said they're going to mess up. Even in Gnostic writings, where it talks about they having it in the Gospel of Judas, they said we had this dream of these people chanting your name, offering these sacrifices, and Jesus said, "This is you. You're leading the people astray." So all these religions like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and all these branches of Christianity, this is why.
Yeah. In a previous interview, I falsely attributed that to the Gospel of Thomas, right? Gospel of Judas, right? Where I particularly like that. There's the dream that they're sacrificing, I think, their family on the altar and all their animals. And they're like, what does this mean? And Jesus laughs and he says, that's you. That's you worshiping your God.
That's it. That's right. He was saying to wake up. And even you look at the ancient Jewish beliefs, there were different bits of Essenes. Some Essenes worship Yahweh's father. Some didn't worship Yahweh at all. They were almost atheists, but they were spiritual. They believed God was within us and all around us, and that everything around us is single-minded as God. So that's a Gnostic way of thinking. And this particular group did regular baptism. They didn't think water washed away their sins. They actually seen it as the emergence of the pools of water and the emergence of oneself with a divine spark. That's another, again, Gnostic way of thinking. They were against the temples and the hierarchies, and they were vegetarians. And early Christianity was vegetarian. When the Romans took the early Christians, they'll stick a piece of raw meat down their throat as a sign of torture. And I can point this out. Some people go, no, they're not, because they ate fish. If you read Peter, after Jesus' death and while he's following Jesus, he suddenly becomes vegetarian. He says he eats cakes and rarely has fruit and vegetables. So rarely has vegetables. He mainly eats cakes and fruit. John the Baptist ate locust bean, and it's been mistranslated into locust. So the Essenes writings even have this. So.
Yeah. You know, the Mandeans were all about like daily baptism, or at least frequent.
Yep. And that's why they said they're a missing link.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I kind of put it as, I wonder if that's not the origin of Christianity. Right.
Well,
so
it kind of makes a bit of sense as well, because Jesus and John, they were both the leaders of the church. So they could have been related, or they could be just the two preachers in a sense.
Yeah.
But
well,
numbers above the other.
There's that the Mandean plus sign. They don't like to call it a cross because it's not a method of torture or death or anything. It symbolizes a person. Too. Yeah.
They were against the cross. And if you look at the Mandeans sort of cross, they got the robe around it and the leaves. And that means the 7 days of creation. And I'm pretty sure God is in everything. So interesting. But the cross itself, when it says carry a cross, that means level of being. You've got life, death, or the past, the future, lower level of being, higher level being, lower level conscious, higher level conscious, lower level dimension, higher level dimension, in a sense. So hell, heaven.
Yeah.
And this is what it means. So when they put him on that cross, it was a way of mocking him, because they didn't understand that, because he spoke in parables, because he'll speak in a fine line. You know, so even bread means knowledge. So all these words, you know.
That's interesting. With the cross was meant to mock him.
Yes. And you don't see many people speak about this. But as like we were speaking before about him possibly surviving the crucifixion, I believe that's very, very possible, because the shroud they wrapped him in, they don't talk about what's on that shroud. There goes blood. The oil they put on that oil could have healed him. It's got cannabis. 6 pounds of it was in that oil, which CBD. Cannabosum or cassia. Cassia was 2 different plants. It was cannabis and this other plant in Jerusalem. You had different things, because Hebrews, many words meant too, like levav means heart and mind. So, but it also contained frankincense and myrrh. So there's 2 ways of making this holy oil, which is in the Bible. And they're actually trying to remove the word cannabosum, which is quite funny. The New International Versions of the Bible by Collins has removed like 150 sentences. And he also he says that he's a good Christian, but he published The Joys of Gay Sex and the Satanic Bible, which is quite funny. Not many people know this. So he's very contradictory. And why? Money. And that's what a lot of it comes down to these days as well, which is follow the money. Just quite shocking.
Yeah. So there's one Paul who persecutes Christians. He later converts to Christianity. So that's one story, right?
Yep.
And then the other, you would put him as synonymous with Simon Magus.
Yes, in a sense. Well, Simon Magus has been converted into the story. There was a separate Paul as well. There was an actual Paul who was a Gnostic. And
so we're talking 3 Pauls?
2 Pauls, in a sense, have been mixed in the story with Simon Magus. So if you want to kind of put Simon Magus as the Paul as well. But there was a Paul that's been mixed into this story as well. And that other Paul was around, I think, the 2nd century, I believe. So as I said, this is why all these stories have been mixed in and confused, because the Bible wasn't written till way after Jesus' death, retellings, because it was oral traditions. Like, they didn't carry a cross. They seen that as, like, today carry an AK-47, being like carrying a weapon or a torture device. They seen the fish symbol, and instead they would put them in the sand and greet people like that. But they even had a snake wrapped around the egg, which meant life, death, rebirth, because they were into reincarnation as well, which is pretty interesting. And that's actually their oldest belief system, is actually reincarnation. Neanderthals even buried their dead in a way that represented reincarnation, which is not all of them, but that's fucking interesting, you know?
That is interesting.
Oldest belief is that.
So in what way were they buried to suggest that?
That I'm not 100% sure, because I read it onto this in the book, in the post. Just a couple of years ago, I read this. I'm pretty sure the way they were doing it was like one was this way and one was pointing that way. So the heads were opposite, and I think they had some plants in the middle of them or something like that, setting position. It was a way of positioning that aligned with it, and also with the spiral cave system, which that spiral also means life, death, rebirth. And that makes a lot of sense as well, because the goddess they worshipped was a fertility goddess and representing life, death, and rebirth. So, and it was Mother Earth as well. So that's the oldest belief in a sense.
Yeah, I'm not terribly familiar with Neanderthals, but I thought they were closer to, lower primates than higher. But
oh, well, that's the thing. With a lot of history we've been told is fucking bullshit. Like that we were told Neanderthals were like ape people. Now we've discovered they had music, they had jewelry. So they weren't stupid. They were making cave paintings. They were making jewelry. They were making flutes. The Homo erectus, not erectus, or there was the species just before Neanderthal, and they found the world's oldest sewing needle with them. Or maybe after Neanderthal. I think it was Homo erectus, I'm pretty sure. They found the world's oldest sewing needle. So it shows these people weren't stupid. They weren't that primitive. They were actually quite intelligent. They actually reckon Asperger's probably come from Neanderthals, or maybe Cro-Magnon man, which is pretty interesting.
What does?
Cro-Magnon man. Oh, sorry, Asperger's. I have Asperger's as well. So something I was looking into.
Yeah, I wonder if I do as well. But
Asperger's is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I was watching a YouTube video. I can't recall what it was, but they say that when you take one of those DNA testing kits, right, test your heritage.
I want to do one of them.
How's that?
I want to do one of them.
Yeah, and they talk about like you're such a percentage Neanderthal, and they said that there's certain traits that are highly correlated with Neanderthals, which is high propensity to keep things and not throw them away, and lack of a fear of heights, and certain things. I forget what it was, but yeah, maybe Asperger's is one of them, right? That's just a Neanderthal trait.
Well, I know it also comes from Cro-Magnon man, and Cro-Magnon man had a bigger brain than us too. They were more intelligent than us for sure, but primitive humans I'm discussing, not like us compared to today. But given the time, they could have been, but there's problems with that bigger head. They were more prone to headaches, brain tumors, and seizures. So we went through de-evolution and evolution at the same time, which is pretty interesting. They were taller than us and taller than Neanderthals, these Cro-Magnon men. And it's actually quite funny. When they first discovered Cro-Magnon men, they thought it was us. They now call them modern humans. So, and they're trying to I think this new age group is trying to call Neanderthals Homo sapiens sapiens, we're trying to call us Homo sapiens sapiens, and they're trying to call them Homo sapiens now. That's those new age alien people trying to fuck shit up. That's the problem with a lot of this evolution. Those ancient alien people have kind of fucked shit up for people trying to actually study history as well, because all that shit's everywhere. It's like, I had a debate with someone a while ago trying to say that Neanderthals come from space. I'm like, no.
I know Bigfoot does, certainly.
That's killer. But, what do you think about Bigfoot? There's a lot of people get into Bigfoot. I'm a bit skeptical of Bigfoot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, as am I.
Yeah.
Oh, here we have a comment here. So, yeah, if anybody's watching, feel free to comment. Here's... I'd call Lauren my number one fan.
Yes.
There are 40,000-year-old skeletons in the middle of Australia.
All around the world.
6'5".
There's also found some that are taller as well. And they're found over in Indonesia. They found shorter people, like about 2 meters high, I think. Like not very tall. But they were killed off by settlers with Captain Cook, pretty much, because they were stealing their shit off their ships, and they seen them as a menace, which is horrible, quite cruel. But they killed them off. But that was also an early ancestor. There's actually a recent study that they're trying to see if they were actual us, just with a disease that made them shorter, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But at one stage, there were many different species of human living together. They found a cave with I think it was 5 or 6 humans living together. It was Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, and one more species. I've actually forgotten a lot of the ancestral names. I read too much. All knowledge gets in there. But it's quite interesting. But they were painting together and hunting together, telling stories and all that sort of stuff, beautiful. So it shows that, we weren't just going off killing each other. We were actually settling. They found cities and, well, not cities, early settlements, huts made out of mammoth bones and all sorts. And some that predate even our so-called civilization. They found old gold mines in South Africa. It's like, well, our ancestors were gold, so evolution is a lot longer than what they claim, and it's a bit different. We don't quite know. We're still working out the pieces.
Yeah.
The reason they don't tell you this is because they're gonna have to rewrite shit, and that costs money. Always follow the dollars.
Yep. There you go.
Need a word with free knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and I mean, kind of we intermarried, or I guess maybe they didn't have marriage, but interbred.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely so.
Yeah. So I guess we weren't totally speciated. Maybe we never were.
Well, they definitely had couples because they were buried with their couples. Like, as I said, when the ones representing reincarnation, that was a couple that was buried, and they were buried with the plants representing, I think it maybe represented the spiral. Pretty sure that's what it has, or they were buried in the spiral. It was one of those two. I have to actually look around for it again. But that big spiral thing is a big meaning, and it's quite funny about that. They actually used that same spiral in this old ritual. I think it was the cure of vertigo, because the baby would travel down to a stream, and it would reset their motion balance or something like that. And it's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They actually showed that ritual in that'll tell you where its origins are, or what it quite represents, because it's a TV show. They showed it in Last Kingdom in the Vikings with that Celtic girl that puts King Harold's son in there to heal him. Well, that's where that actually comes from. It was, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that show.
Yeah. That would be ancient Neolithic and Druid and Gaelic, Celtic, and possibly even Scandinavian, around all those sort of regions. Very, very pagan, not ideal, old school.
Yeah. So more with the idea of Paul. So what do you take the story to be? Like, there's two kind of storylines with Paul, right? One who seems to say, oh, the law is great. One says the law is terrible.
My honest opinion of Paul doesn't really matter. And the reason I say that is because Paul never really met Jesus or anything like that. The real message of Jesus was Jesus, because all the other disciples messed it up in my eyes. And the idea of my eyes, because I'm Gnostic, is Christ is within you. Find it for yourself and achieve it for yourself. We are all God in a sense. And I say God is energy itself. That is this life, death, rebirth itself. It's all around us. So life is the ultimate form of recycling. I even talk about how on my channel, how black holes suck up galaxies, and then the universe expands. So just this whole point of energy. So I say, live your best experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Jesus said, Christ is within you. Follow after him, achieve it for yourself. Achieve your own gnosis, in a sense. So Paul's message doesn't matter to me. I say, you be your own teacher.
Yeah,
that's my take on it. Otherwise, if you were asked about the truth of it as well, I could explain that a bit, and I would say I can't give a full accurate answer because I won't be able to full understand myself, because it's too much is mixed in with each other. I think most of the story of Paul is mostly Simon Magnus, and maybe early bit of the Gnostic Paul mixed in, but all three Pauls, in a sense, if you want to call them three, Simon Magnus or this Gnostic Paul, and the maybe early 2nd century or late 1st century possible, mixed in on this one story.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately it was to root out Gnosticism out of the church, and also to root out the Essene movements and all that, so they can ultimately control it as either Catholic or Orthodox, which just mean correct and right ones. So history is written by the winners.
Indeed, yeah. And at least I guess one version of the Pauline Church won over.
Yes.
Right? Or maybe
100%.
they consolidated all of them.
Yes. Well, there was even a Pauline group of Christianity as well that were even declared heretics at one stage too. So it's quite interesting. And they were around when there was Waldenism and Bogomilism going on around, and some of them even went into Jerusalem and were persecuted by Muslims and by Christianity, which is, quite interesting.
Yeah.
But there was many forms of Christianity, and there were many forms of later what they deemed as heretics. And ultimately, it was really the Catholic and Orthodox Church doing that fucked it up even worse. Really, if you have all these other groups trying to escape this particular power base and try to find something better themselves, or try to find their own truth without having to pay a priest or for their sins or to heal them. Because the Catholic Church and Orthodox really suppressed everything and controlled the knowledge. They weren't just killing off these groups. They were taking their knowledge. This is why you had to see a priest to go get healed. Those witch doctors you see with the witch mask or whatever during the plague, they were priests, most of them. So that was how they got that knowledge of medicine. They were keeping it all in their Vaticans and also in their libraries. So only they could practice it, So it's control-based.
Yeah. And so Simon Magus, he, is trying to buy his way in, right? Just like, how they say Paul essentially
was trying to buy his way in with the Roman Empire. Well,
and giving money to the poor.
Yeah.
Right. And so you think that's telling really the same story that was just kind of blended into each other?
Yes, 100%. 100%. Definitely blended in.
Yeah. And, I've always wondered.
I think also some of Marcion's story could even be blended in with it too. Like, I think it's been adapted from a bit of everywhere, to be honest.
How do you figure Marcion is blended in?
Well, Paul claims to have wrote the first letters, in a sense. And Marcion's the ones who wrote the Bible first up, that brought in all the text together. So that's where that comes into play. So you have all these so-called letters of Paul. There was a lot of letters of Marcion that have now been lost to time. So rewritten stuff and just claimed to be Paul and to make their group more dominant. So we have all these writings. So there's proof the Catholic Church is writing their own stuff. You ever heard of the Epistle of the Apostles?
No.
I uploaded it on my channel. It's an ancient, it was once very popular ancient Gnostic writing. It's now lost to time. The only reason we know it exists is because the heresy hunters and the Catholic Church made a forgery of it to make it anti-Gnostic. And that text was one stage hated by the whole Catholic and even Orthodox Church. The Orthodox were even sending out heresy hunters, and eventually Orthodox stopped doing it. Catholics continued, and eventually the Catholics and the Crusaders even raided the Byzantine Empire, which was the Orthodox capital pretty much of the world at the time. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how they kind of, once they had no common enemy, they just turned on each other in a sense. And then some peace was issued and Islam come and then conquered Byzantine Empire, which then later become the Ottoman Empire, and they changed Constantinople into Constantinople. So yeah, and even with them, they were sort of okay with some religions and they did persecute others. So everything's been blended in together, unfortunately. Even Mandaism has changed a bit because of Islam, because they were getting persecuted and killed off. The Mandaism Act paid the Muslim government like $1 million just to leave them alone. So they were under protection of Sharia law. So everything changes in a sense. And a lot of that was due to the persecutions of the Catholic, Orthodox, and even Islam, which there were many forms of Islam back then too, which is quite funny, right?
Yeah.
Many different groups.
Yeah, I've wondered about, different version of Islam.
Yeah, I couldn't name them all, but there's actually kind of interesting way. I actually found out a couple of other groups. There was a game that you can play called Crusader Kings. If you look up all the religions in the game, you actually get to find all these lists of religions that were going on at that time. So I've researched all those names. I was like, killer, I got to learn a bit more. And it was easy to track down these groups. Not saying don't go read their game for the fucking information. Just look up the names for yourself, But yeah, which is pretty cool, which is something I like doing. I love history, all history.
Yeah, certainly.
Be my passion.
Yep, absolutely. So what do you think is, early Christianity's reliance on Paul? Like, they're just fascinated with this figure. They want to be the
fascination would be from really the Gnostic Paul as well, and beside Magnus as well, but probably most likely that Gnostic Paul, because of the speaking in tongues. And speaking in tongues it comes from the Gnostics. This is why some Catholics are a bit funny on them speaking in tongues, saying, no, it's not the devil, or no, it's good. It's because they remember stuff passed from the oral traditions that's been told and told. That's why you hear stories from them that actually aren't in the Bible, because somewhere deep down they remember because it's been passed down throughout their families, which is interesting.
What's this? What are the oral stories?
You have a couple instances. Which is pretty much what's been, if you read like the Lost Scriptures and stuff like that as well, you kind of see some of that stuff, what they were talking about and stuff. Kind of lose myself with too much shit talking. With the old traditions would be, there you go, I remember now, sorry, I got off track. The speaking in tongues. And that story is with Paul and stuff saying that it's not everyone can speak in tongues. And so don't get jealous of me because I can speak in tongues. Only certain people can do it, but you've got your own purpose as well. So we all sustain each other. And that sort of story has been passed down and remembered. And then later on, when the Catholics started saying, speaking in tongues is wrong. They deemed it heretics and started burning off Gnostics and stuff. People have had mixed confusions, and they actually don't remember their past in a sense. So they think, oh, speaking in tongues is okay, because some priests say yes, it's okay, some priests don't, because when it was driven underground, this is where some of these teachings are passed on orally. So this is why they remember in a sense. So when some Christians like speaking tongues, some think it's evil. And that's the reason why, because it's been passed down through oral tradition in a sense. And same with the story of Jesus and John being cousins, and John apparently touches the womb or something like that, or kicks the womb because he's close to Jesus, something like that. That story's not in the Bible. That's been removed from the Bible. So that's been passed down orally.
Yeah.
So that's how people would see. If you ever come across Christians, they might say something that's not quite in the Bible, and that's the reason why. It's because they've heard it. So they heard it from a preacher that's heard it from someone else that's heard it from this. So
yeah,
they don't read. If you go to a church, they're not going to read everything that's in the Bible. They're going to skip a lot. You know, they're not going to tell you read Judges 11 to 12. They're not going to tell you read Ezekiel 20, I think, or maybe 22. It's where God orders people to bake bread and human shit and eat it in front of everyone, or wood dried in human shit. And the Judges 11 is the sacrifice bit. And then in Numbers, somewhere in Numbers, might be Numbers 32, is where God demands 32 virgins. Somewhere in Numbers, I've got a list written down from when I did my book on horrible Bible readings.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, there's some of them that you never really hear about that, you know, where Paul says he knows a guy who went up to the third heaven.
Yep. And all that's Gnostic, in a sense, all the levels of heaven. And that also comes down from teachings of Kabbalah, levels of the Kabbalah. You got the lower dimensions, high level goes with the cross as well, level of being, you know, higher dimensions, which is all rooted in this tradition of pretty much early Essene and Gnosticism. But that way of thinking, so because there were many different groups of Essenes, you can't call them one group. Varieties, just like varieties of Gnosticism, varieties of Judaism. You know, you had very different groups of Jews. Like even in Jesus' time, you had Zealots, you had Essenes, you had the Pharisees, the Sadducees. You know, yeah. So and even Syriac Jews too.
Yeah,
Canaanite Jews too. So there were many branches. So
yeah. Do we have, like, outside of the belief of a figure named Jesus, is there really like a central theme that they all kind of rally around?
We have an early Roman contradiction of it that sort of mocked Jesus and stuff. And I think they put a donkey on his head, and it was on an old early piece of graffiti, and he's in the cross symbol, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, what is it? Christian worships their God. Is that what the graffiti says? Something along those lines?
I'm pretty sure as well. And I'm pretty sure there's another one. I'm not too sure if this is legit, but somewhere says, dumb Christians, don't you know your empire, so your religion was made by the emperors? And I have to find that one and see if that's legit. I don't know if that's legit. But that seems interesting. I forgot where I've heard that. Recently I've heard that from. I think I heard it was in a list of comments on one scholar or something like that. So, or maybe it was in a book. I'm going to read it up and find out for that truth. So don't quote me on that one. You know?
Yeah, I kind of think Valiant, maybe it kind of fits with Roman provenance, right? Which is another interesting theory. You know,
you heard of Roman circus before? Like, it means keep your population fed and entertained and keep them on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of this stuff is politically motivated as well. Even with the name Jesus, it means in Latin Hail Zeus, but in Greek it means, closely translated as they possibly can, it means Yeshua. So you have two opposite reasons. Why is Zeus in there? It's because of
Zeus?
Constantine, yes. Emperor Constantine, the Roman, pretty much. Some people don't believe he was actual Christian. It was just a politically motivated thing. I think somewhat he was, but he didn't understand that what it was in a technical term because he heard his old traditions. He was intrigued. And that's because he didn't know that there would be different forms of Christianity. He thought it was just one group. So that's why he wanted to use that to unify his empire. But when he found out they're all together, he's like, what are you guys doing? Why are you arguing? Let's get together. Let's make this one book. But it didn't quite happen like that. It was more like there was 11 councils. So of these 11 councils, he was involved in Council Nicaea. But after that, after his death, the councils are still going on and they're still debating what was in the Bible. You know, so it's a long time of deciding, rewriting and stuff, you know. And I think that's one reason why Simon Magnus tried to buy his way because he was rejected from that sort of group, in a sense. So he wanted the
Mhm.
seat, which is kind of a shame because he was actually friends with Peter and was following Peter at one stage. So he was possibly one of Peter's students.
Well, that's interesting too, because we're conflating Simon Magus with Paul. Why aren't we conflating him with Peter, right? Who's also named Simon. You'd think that if we're gonna
that is interesting. I never thought about that one, brother. That's really cool. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me some messages in as well. And the reason I reckon the Simon is there is because he probably named himself after that. And the reason why it was so common for people to adopt names of their teachers or masters. So that could be one reason why he was named Simon Magnus. So also the Magnus could be coming in from the Roman thing. He could have a Roman Greek background for one. I have to look up his background as well, so I don't actually know. But the adoption of name was quite common throughout the Roman Empire, but also even in Jerusalem. Like they would say they would pick up a trade, they might be adopted into that family. They would name themselves after that person.
Yeah.
Even last names before they were given, they were named after people of noble rank.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Or do you think it could have been the other way around where, let's see, so do we think Simon Peter was a follower of Simon Magus?
I think Simon Magnus would be a follower of Peter, in a sense.
Interesting.
But in a sense, there's even time where he's pointed out Peter was wrong in a sense. And that's where Paul comes in and says that Paul's said that Peter was wrong about something. That's what the stories have merged into together. So student and teacher bond.
Yeah, it's kind of a confusing view, isn't it? Like,
it is.
You wonder. So you would put this all as historical, right? These were figures that existed.
Yes, they've just been mixed in together, and the same thing has happened with like Ragnar Lothbrok in a sense. They're not sure if he existed, but different stories combined into one. King Arthur, all these different kings combined into one story. Even some of Jesus' stories mixed in with King Arthur, and the reason I say that: 12 knights, 12 disciples. Going to Avalon, returning the once future king, resurrection. So.
Yeah. Or you wonder if they're just not Jungian, right? Like we have the base 10 system because we have 10 fingers, right? And cool. I mean, there's 12 signs of the zodiac.
Yeah.
Right? It just works so well to have 12 months.
100%. Well, that's also another thing with the Roman stuff, and it's interesting because there was more than 12 disciples. There were 13 as well at one stage, but Mary Magdalene was also a disciple as well. So this being said, the Gnostics and the early calendar was 13 months. 12 comes from the Gregorian calendar, which is the 13th Pope who hated women, and he changed that calendar to actually throw women off their period cycles. And the old calendar actually went with women's periods and the full moon because the Gnostics were very femme. They were for equal rights. So big on mother because they believed mother was the creation, and the vagina was the portal to this world.
So how does that work? Changing the calendar from 13 months just to mess with women?
With the menstrual cycles. Because apparently, I'm not a girl, so I don't know how this works, but it goes with the full moon cycle. So it would go through the 13 cycles of the moon to go through the quarter whole. So that was how it would go in. So they could tell when women were going to have their period and stuff like that. Interesting. But the Pope was really against women and wanted to make it into a Roman-based calendar. So even July is named after Julius Caesar. August is Augustus Caesar. So politically motivated Roman church, pretty much why. Gotcha. And also you got your leap years added in. That never existed. All the dates added in mathematically perfect. And the Gnostics were huge on maths. I love maths. Maths is rational. Science is mostly theory. So they've kind of fucked it up adding the leap year. People can work for longer, paid less and stuff like that, And also back then, it wasn't really so much about being paid less. It was because they had slaves. So they'll be working longer hours as well, trying to work up their freedom and shit, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Or indebted servants that paid off their debts.
Yeah.
So follow the money.
Yeah, that's a common theme.
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah. What would you say as far as Christian origins? Would you say, like, how do you think it all came together?
Well, the Christian origins, I would say ultimately, well, it depends which version of Christianity. The first Christians would have been the Essenes and the Gnostics, in a sense, and I say that. And the reason why is because the Jewish, like the Essenes, were more the stricter version. The Gnostics were the Gentiles, pretty much, where the Essenes said that you had to go out in the wilderness, you had to become a Jew first, you had to be circumcised, and they sort of were very, very strict. So they were trying to follow more James, and then the other group sort of followed Mary Magdalene, and Thomas, and I think Philip. But that's lot said more Jesus' teachings that foreskin didn't really matter. You know, it was circumcision of your heart that was what mattered, not circumcision of your penis. You didn't need to mutilate yourself. And so they were more trying to focus on Jesus' teaching, where James was trying to focus more on the law. So he was more stricter. So that's where you got the Essene branch, and then you got the Mary. Well, Mary was Jesus' most loved disciple. I believe it was his wife. And if you look at Gospel of Philip, it mentions that he loved her, kissed her often. So it mentions that he was his lover. So this makes a lot of sense back then, because back then you had to be married by a certain age, and you were being considered a bit weird or an outcast, in a sense, not being married at that age as well. So, yeah. But with that being said, it would have been from the early mystery group of Essenes that had a Gnostic way of thinking, and they did regular baptism. They were vegetarians. They tried to practice more compassionate animals. They said God didn't command any sacrifice. It's man-made. They rejected the hierarchies and the temples. And they believed the body was also the temple, but they didn't want to bring new souls in the world. They were talking about, some believed it was the end of the world, and where you got some sees it was the end of the era. Today's not the time to bring kids into this world because it's corrupted and it's evil. So that's a Gnostic way of thinking. And the regular baptism, but with the not washing away the sins, but the emergence of the pools and the emergence of the divine spark is a Gnostic way of thinking. So I'd say that would be the particular lot Jesus belonged to. And then they followed mostly Jesus' teachings. So he was well liked because it was compatible with their teachings. And also a bit of Zoroastrian teachings, because they were very similar to Gnosticism too. And then you had the Greeks, we had Stoics that believed in a single mind, and they would have found some of his messages attractive as well. So if you had some Greeks that believed that he was Hermes, so all these different followers, that's why Jesus is in the middle saying, you know, like, no, he's saying that, you know, Christ is within you. You'll find your own divinity and stuff like that. Follow me, you know, or give to the poor. And this group was also big on giving up their possessions and giving it to the local community, the poor. So this is ultimately his teaching. So
yeah, you know, along those lines, I've wondered, I don't know if of any scholar that has talked about this, where
not many do.
Paul talks about, you know, to keep his position, he's giving to the poor, right, as part of the deal, right? I wonder if he's not talking about the Ebionites, that he's paying off another.
No, they were called the poor ones. And
how's that?
They were called the poor ones back then.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I wonder.
And they mentioned it there, but the funny thing is, they were also arguing against Paul. So
exactly. So,
but as I said, because you got two Pauls, you got one that was given to the community, you got one that was persecuting them. So they've been merged into. So yes, there was a Paul in a sense, but it's hard to tell on his accurate date. And the reason why is because he didn't have a big standing in the world, and that's why, even with these writings and stuff like that, being written by different people and stuff, he didn't have a huge impact in a sense, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, like an artist that becomes famous after he dies. Right?
Yeah, in a sense, and all the apostles and all that are more famous than him and stuff like that. And that's because, as I said, he didn't make a huge impact. He wasn't the only leader of the church then, you know. He just, the only one that really says Paul was an apostle was Paul. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So what would convince you that it's not the same guy that just has a vision and he turns his life around? And I guess there's no really kind of putting together like their different teachings, right? But yes. Like maybe he's persecuting the Christians.
I would love to think someone like that, to be honest, brother. But there's just too much evidence that points towards these different people, and it makes a lot of sense to me because of old legends that have so much times in the past people being merged into one story. You know,
Okay.
happens
And
so regularly over time. But there's even stories of Jesus being of fatherless, some of him being born of rape, and I could even see that message as something beautiful, that he's come from something dark and he turned his light into the absolute light. So I can always see balance in everything, in a sense, you know. But
like
even the
what's
virgin birth story, if you notice that, a lot of Christians didn't believe in that in early Christianity. The Gnostic group believed the virgin birth was symbolic and that everyone was born of the virgin, but not the flesh. So it's your soul, your mind born of the virgin. Then you had the Ebionites that believed that God adopted him after his baptism. So I would say the Gnostics were right because they say take everything as symbolism, don't take it for literal. And there were early Christians that were like that too. So this goes back to the early teachings as well.
Yeah. What would be the biggest thing that convinces you, outside of it was commonly done, that there's multiple Pauls going on?
Ancient scriptures and events.
Like what specifically?
And also messages, like that you see contradiction of messages, different messages of these other people, and also just the two Pauls in general. You had one that was Saul, one that was Paul, and you had one that was Gnostic, giving to the community, and you have one that was hunting down and then apparently later converted and really mixed in with the Romans and sort of, yeah. So they try to make his story mixed in with Simon Magus, with him trying to buy his way in and stuff. So they try to put a good take on his story. When unfortunately the actual Paul, well, the one of the Bible anyway, I should say, not the actual Paul Myers will be the Gnostic one mixed in with a bit of Simon Magus and this other Paul. But this other Paul in the Bible, who they claim is the Paul who wrote all these writings, I see him as a sexist sort of man and big on Roman things. So he's trying to play his own power hand in a growing world.
Or do you think that's just interpolations on Paul, on his writings, that, you know, they're trying to say, we don't really want women to have a position in the church.
Yes.
So we're just going to write that into the mouth of Paul.
Yes, because in early church, women were a huge part of it. Many followers of women of Jesus and all that sort of stuff. And he even let Mary Magdalene preach to women with him and stuff like that. So you have an early dominance rules, and it's possible that Mary Magdalene even funded Jesus. And then even after his movement, you have all these female saints as well, but it's slowly being taken out. And that's because of one of the male dominance. And they even made it illegal for anyone to read a Bible. Then they made it illegal for women to read a Bible, and it was illegal for women to paint or learn how to read or write. If they did, they were possessed by the devil. So they want to remove that. And even the statues there were statues of Mary Magdalene around. People started worshiping Mary Magdalene. So they changed it to the Virgin Mary to try and get rid of that. But before that, there was the two Marys. You had the Mary, which all represented Sophia in a sense, or the mother, the wisdom. So having the fall and rising or giving birth to the world. So you got the mother and then you got the virgin. So the original virgin was meant to be Mary Magdalene. So meant to be the bride of Christ. So it's quite interesting. So he was out to unify, in a sense, Jesus was. So not quite a religion, one spirituality, maybe one religion in a sense. So to unify everyone, to stop them from fighting, it was his ultimate goal, you know. So he had a message of love, you know, peace and love. That's why his message was even different to Yahweh, where Yahweh said, stone everyone that speaks my name in vain. And, you know, but Jesus forgives. He goes, I don't care if you mock me, you know. So you have these two messages are completely different. And that just goes in with the time. You have to look at these earlier groups, and especially reading these older writings, which many of them predate the Bible. But they're all different groups. But you really have to read them all, in a sense, to get what's the truth that's in them. And you have to see a lot of it symbolically, because it's not the message of outside of you, it's the message from within yourself that really matters. What difference is it going to make to you? Are you going to go out there and do good, or are you going to go out there and do shitty things that used to control your life?
Yeah.
Ultimate message.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting, the two Marys, right? We have Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and
you also have his sister Mary as well.
Oh, really? I'm not familiar. Is that in the Gospel?
It's in the Bible. Oh, in a sense, I don't think she's actually named. I think it's another scripture that might be removed from the Bible. So no one actually knows his sister's name. There's meant to be two sisters, and I think there's two brothers, maybe three. I think there's two brothers, James and Thomas. I have to look it up again and reread. Gotcha. I read so much.
Yeah, the twin, but
yes. I know what other reason that twin means. It means the twin means just like Jesus, or it could mean his twin, or it also means testicles, genitals. So genitals.
All right. Yeah. I've not heard that.
I actually heard that one from someone that was having a debate with me, And I laughed. I said, "No, you're full of shit." And I was like, "You're just being a troll." And I looked up. I said, "Oh fuck, I'm so sorry. You're all right. I just
Yeah.
thought you were being a dick just because he come out of nowhere and said it means testicles."
Yeah.
I was like, "What?" But yeah, no, he was right. I gave him so much
Yeah.
credit because I love being wrong. So that's way of improving. You get to see, you get to learn new shit. You know, it's beautiful.
It's a good trait to have, I'm sure.
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, just
And-
like Jesus. And that's why he even took him and told him private things. There's actually two sort of gospels of Thomas. There's one, the gospel of Thomas, and there's a book of Thomas. And the book is what Jesus told him in secret. And then Thomas mentions he took him away, and he says, he comes back and says, "I can't tell you anything to disciples, otherwise you'll pick up stones and throw them at me." And
yeah.
fire will come
What
out and
did he
consume
tell
you
him?
from the stones. Pretty much that you are God, in a sense, that Christ is within you, pretty much. Yeah. And others didn't really understand it in a sense. So, yeah. But you can read that in the book of Thomas. I've got it. Actually, I don't know how here. It might be. I have the Nag Hammadi library, and I have Lost Scriptures. Lost Scriptures contains writings by heresy hunters and also Gnostic writings and some Ebionites, Essene, and other branches of Christianity, and also other writings of Paul. And then Nag Hammadi has all the Gnostic scriptures, but also the scripture that wasn't written by the Gnostics. So a lot of people just think Gnostics buried their own writings. No, they didn't. They also buried some Essene, Ebionite writings, and they also buried some Plato because the church was going around burning everything. So they actually were trying to protect these other communities. And at first, the Essenes and Ebionites didn't like that. They didn't really trust them. But ultimately, they let them bury their stuff. So they looked past this group that were sort of saying that, "Oh, you're wrong," and they wanted to do the greater good and help them because they knew something. How do you destroy a people off? You destroy their culture. So they buried that culture, which
makes sense because you wonder, a group of vegans, they have this massive cachet of leather books.
Yeah, it's funny. Right? I don't like vegans. I like, for that reason. You can go off and buy pants out of human skin. It's from a vegan site, and if you look at the leader of PETA, he's driving around a Ferrari and leather seats. So it's follow the money.
I think of it as they just took the books and they were saying we need to preserve these, right? Even though maybe they're not about the leather, right?
I think they maybe started off as something and then money got to their heads and they don't care. But I honestly see it's just a new age religion, really. Like, some vegans are awesome, but the ones that like Peter and these extremes, basically a new age religion in my eyes. You know.
Well, I'm referring to the Essenes, right?
My bad.
They were vegetarian and
vegetarian. I was going to say they weren't vegan, but vegetarian, yes.
Oh, they drank milk.
Some did. Some didn't. So some, I guess you can classify as, some didn't eat eggs, some ate eggs. Just like some Cathar ate fish, some only ate vegetables. So different groups of Essenes. So yeah, Jesus, not too sure, but I'd say most likely vegetarian. Not sure if he ate fish because that's seen, but I know the fish is kind of been added in there later. You know, even the story of feeding the multitude of people, the original story was bread and grapes, and it's been changed later to like bread and fish. So that was added in because Mediterraneans brought in their diet.
I've not heard that. Where did you hear that it's bread and grapes?
A couple of scholars. Religion for Breakfast spoke about it. Unlearn the Lies is another one. A couple other Christian apologetics, and I just try to think of scholar-wise where I've heard it as well. I forgot the scholar's name.
Well, I know I've heard it on a couple of channels. Because he has a PhD, doesn't he?
Yeah, he is that, and same with what's it called? Unlearn the Lies. I think he has a PhD, and he's also a Christian apologetic, but he'll speak up. I've seen him make some mistakes too, because I think with scholars and stuff like that, they've been given one lot of information. It's rarely they can look outside of it and search a bit of everything, because they've been told to look up one subject. So when you got someone like me and you were able to look up independent things that they won't look up, you're just going to be willing to spend a bit of money on the books and make sure they're authentic. Buy books by scholars, the ones that are actually universities. You know, like for instance, if you're going to buy a Nag Hammadi library, go buy a Nag Hammadi library or buy Lost Scriptures by Bartley Ehrman. Do not buy the Gnostic Gospels. They've been changed, horribly changed. And reason why is they sell them in Catholic bookstores. So when they didn't want the Nag Hammadi translated, they're like, no. All right, yes, we killed these people, but you can buy the information. We're not going to hide it. So they read it, their own fucking version. They fucking sell it in their bookstores. So if you're buying Gnostic Gospels, you're not reading actual Nag Hammadi library. But you're not reading the Nag Hammadi library unless you learn it in Coptic anyway. So you're reading an English translation of it, and words can change. But do not buy Gnostic Gospels. I'll show you what the book looks like. I wasted my money on it. I just wanted to get Gospel of Judas because I didn't have it at the time. I have it now, but I read that and I was like, what the fuck is this? The worst hunk of junk I ever bought. It cost about $20.
Mm-hmm.
Do not buy that. It's horrible. It's
And of course, it has an
changed.
on there, right? Which I'm sure.
Yes. But the thing is, what they did worse with that one is when you read the Nag Hammadi, God's not always mentioned. A lot of it's single mind, Modad, the mother, father.
Yep.
In that book, God is mentioned in every fucking sentence. So they've completely butchered it. They've completely changed the writings. Even the start is different in some of the writings. I'm like, what have he's done here? And now I go, that's why the Catholic bookstore sells it.
Interesting.
They don't want you to know. That's why some Gnostics still worship Yahweh when Gnostics were against the God of the Bible. And that's because of this reason, because they want to confuse the people and they don't want everyone being Gnostics. Imagine the world. People would ask questions. People would have been meditating everywhere. It would be a better place, but it wouldn't be perfect because people would still read the writings and believe every word for word and not see it symbolically or understand the hidden meanings, which that's Gnosis, secret teachings. It's like the boy who cried wolf. If you don't understand the meaning of that story, the meaning is secret to you. Everything's speaking symbolically and things being spoken in parables. So a lot of people don't know bread means knowledge. So everything's got hidden meanings in it.
Okay.
Know? Which is
and
cool.
What do the grapes mean, or the fish?
Fish would be representing us as well. Also masculine and feminine energy. If you put two fishes together, you've pretty much got an infinity symbol, but you also got this other symbol that's round, that's got this into it. You have to put it in. It means masculine and feminine energy, male and female, alpha, omega.
Gotcha. The Vesica Pisces.
Yeah. I forgot the actual word for it. Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, fish is also representing you and me, pretty much the people.
Yeah.
And same with grapes as well. Also, grapes can be representing purity and purification, also creation.
How so?
With the grapes being turned into wine, blood as well. And wine, in a sense, they would purify it in a sense. Otherwise, you're drinking unfortified wine, or whatever you call it, the actual word. Purified wine in a sense, so otherwise you'll be just drinking straight out the batch. So they would go through a filtration process and clean it and stuff. So you go through a purification. So you see this as well. And the grapes being grown on a tree, so bearing good fruit. So your good actions is good fruit.
So with the bread and grapes, right, feeding the multitude, are we saying that early texts say that, have it as grapes, not fish?
Yes, grapes and bread. Yes, the fish has been added in much later. I think the fish was added in around the 2nd or 3rd century, and that was with the Mediterranean diet, and that's because a lot of Paul's rides been changed, put in the Mediterranean to be with the Romans, to convert more Romans and pagans. And another reason was that to get rid of old holidays like Sadadara or Sadadura, I forgot how to pronounce the word. They changed it to Christmas. And, make it more acceptable for pagans to convert, not get angry, not revolt. That I'm losing my day off, or it's just now you're not worshiping sun god. You're saying prayers to Jesus instead. But you get to keep that holiday. You get to get drunk. So yeah, it was easy to convert the masses in a sense, and a lot of it was really planned. Even with the Council of Nicaea, it wasn't just Christians in that meeting; pagans were there too. That fish hat that they wear is for the Roman fish god. So politically motivated. Politically based, as all religions pretty much mostly have some political motivation in them. Like even in ancient Egypt, you had mystery schools, but you had the priest, the hierarchies, the royal families. They had their own religion separate to the people. So it's quite interesting. So mystery schools.
Yeah, that seems to be a common theme. Is like you have like the people, the priestly class, and then you have the common people believing something completely different, right? Like I was just talking to Robert Spencer, right, who wrote Did Muhammad Exist, right? And we were talking about Iran, right? You have the Ayatollah and you have the religious elite, right? And then you have what the people believe, and the people aren't really on board with that, right?
Yeah,
So
man.
you wonder, like, but they're the people that come up with the religion, right? So yeah, and so
You
I
know
mean,
something funny actually about Islam you might like? I had a question a while ago. Goes, oh, what about the Golden Age of Islam? And they don't actually know this. The Golden
Yeah.
Age of Islam was actually when a group called the Druze emerged out of Islam as a philosophical and social revolution. So they were into science and philosophy, mass. They rejected the Quran. They believed Muhammad was a what's the word? Not a messiah, a prophet in a sense. So they believed Jesus was a prophet too. So they believed in all these sort of prophet messiahs sort of things in a sense. They were also equal rights on women, but women had to marry by 21. But they were allowed to preach. And Islam really rejected that in a sense. But there were heaps of groups of Islam, and they all killed each other off in a sense as well. There was even a book burnings of Qurans that was by one of Muhammad's family members later on, and he wanted to show that, say there was no different Qurans, there was only one type of Muslim, so he went around book burning, but they didn't burn them all. So, you know, there were different groups. That plan really backfired. I've also heard about some stuff about did Muhammad exist? Like David Wood said yes, because some of the stuff is too embarrassing for it not to. I think a lot of stories have been mixed in. I'm a bit conflicted by Muhammad. I don't really think he should be seen as a prophet because he was a warlord and slave trader. So I don't think that's anything to do with peace and love, to be honest. You know, I wouldn't sell slaves or fucking hurt anyone. You know, that's peace and love. I don't step on ants. If I do, I feel bad. You know, like I used to go off and kill shit, but since I've done all this, nothing. You know, so I eat meat from time to time. Sometimes I do vegetarianism, but my own reasons, compassion reasons. I just find what works for you. You know, like I'm not going to force anyone. It's what works for you. You know, that's my big faith on take on things, I should say.
Yeah. No, yeah, I avoid ants.
Yeah.
As well. And yeah.
Well, they help the world work.
How's that?
They help the world work, you know. They didn't go off into the soil, our soil would be fucked, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with bees, with no humans.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
Exactly.
Circle of life.
Indeed. So maybe one last point we can touch on is, you know, I'm especially interested in, you know, mystery religions. Zoroastrian wasn't really a mystery religion. Mithraism, especially, which is kind of like the early cousin of Christianity, right? And so we have these rituals that are a bit lost to time. Do you suspect, like I would imagine you kind of associate Christianity as the earliest forms or a mystery religion?
Yeah, pretty much, basically, yeah. In a sense, I'd say an early take on spirituality, I would say, like depending on the group. You know, I'd say not all Gnostics, but some Gnostics was an early take on spirituality, especially with the sense of all of us are God, it's all around us, and it's unknowable in a sense, you know, so it's not going to be punishing and evil and crap like that, you know. So also about your own spark and your own divine, learning knowledge and progressing yourself, you know, that's to me spirituality, you know, because it hasn't got the outside faith of you worshipping something, it's within you, you know.
Yeah, and they have the different grades, right, to kind of represent. Do you think there was something like that in Christianity? Do you suspect there were rituals?
Oh yeah, definitely were. Well, baptism is pretty much a ritual, and even with the Valentinian Gnostics, and I wonder how far this goes back. And they used to put this substance, it's like a flower or a herb they put in it's been lost to time now. They don't actually know what it was, but they put it in the wine and it released serotonin, a happy effect. And they'd sit there for the meditations and their praying after having this wine. And you don't need much. So it was like some people reckon it might be like a mild trip like cannabis, or like a mixture of a trip and cannabis mixed with wine. So it's kind of interesting.
Well,
I think Dr. Price mentioned that one, actually, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I'm not familiar. I know the Egyptians had blue lotus.
Yes.
Right?
They also had the DMT through the tree. That they called the tree of life. They also had magic mushroom cults too. And if you look at early Christianity with the tree of life, that was a magic mushroom. And even if you look at before that, the flesh of the gods was a magic mushroom. So it could be that early Christians were using magic mushrooms as well, and that could have been changed into bread, and that's why bread comes in for knowledge. And there was actually an early Christian group that believed Jesus was the magic mushroom as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
And there's actually a cult surviving today that's in Mexico that believe the same thing.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. It's what, San Pedro's cactus or something
yes,
like that?
I think so. I've forgotten the name.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite interesting. But yes, magic mushrooms were definitely involved in the sense, like I say, even cannabis was too, because of the holy oil that he was rubbing on his followers. Because Mashak, which is where Christos comes from, means anointed one, anointed with oil, anointed with spirit, which if you like to see it as, I guess. But yeah, that oil would explain a lot of the miracles as well. Like capes, it can cure epilepsy, stop seizures, gets rid of the calluses in your eyes as a mild form of blindness, boost your immune system. They can use as a pleasant smelling fragrance.
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to make that oil because it's meant to give you a good experience for your meditation. So it's CBD, it won't get you high or anything. You just rub it on your skin or you drink it, and it can have great healing properties. There was actually a girl, it was here in Australia. She had to actually go overseas just to get this treatment, which is so sad. She was having 150 seizures a day. They gave her that oil, the same oil that was Jesus rubbing on his followers, and it dropped her seizures down to 1 or none. That's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, so much that they could do, but everything's followed the dollars, follows the money, and follow the pharmaceutical company or follow the coal companies these days. You know, even back then it was followed the money. It was the ruling societies, and the Pharisees would rub the sick people with the oil, but you had to pay for it usually, and that was like a price of a horse or a house. So you weren't able to afford that. So they were selling lucky charms. So instead of getting healed, you'd buy a lucky charm and praise God that you might be okay. That's why the scene in the temple, Jesus starts throwing shit. That's why he hated that crap. And so he's taken the oils. He broke the law, and he's rubbing the oil on all the people for free. He says to his disciples, rub this on anyone you find that's sick. You know, so you have and this also could explain the trips in India, when it says that it could be myth as well. How I mentioned he went to India, and the way of thinking over there, cannabis was used as well, and the way of his thinking could be very different. And because there's a legend over there, the Hindus tried to kill him because he broke the law over there, and that was healing the unclean. Ancient Hinduism mentioned that it was against the law to heal anyone with leprosy. It wasn't until the Agori, which are kind of nasty Hindus that drink their own piss and eat dead bodies, they started healing people with leprosy and skin diseases. That Hindus said, well, we're meant to be a better version of them, so let's start doing that. So I think that it did happen because that information back then, how would that be known in a sense? So I think, yes, because ancient Hinduism was like that. They rejected skin disease. Same with ancient Jewish people. They thought skin disease was nasty. So if he's gone off healing people, that's beautiful. You know, he looked past, he wasn't a sheep. He didn't follow the leader. He thought for himself, you know?
Yeah.
And that I like.
Yeah. So on that line, temples in India put cannabis in the chai that they give out for some festivals.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think it's Festival of Holi.
Yeah, I think they've got a weed festival over there. I know in Nepal they do.
Yeah, it's it's called Bhang, Bhang.
I thought you were going to say bong, like.
Yeah, not Bong, but it's interesting that they're both cannabis related.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And in Hinduism, cannabis is the body of which, along the lines of like a sacrament, right?
Yeah, I think it's to do with Shiva as well.
What? Say again?
I think it's to do with Shiva as well.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the body of Shiva.
Yeah. And also the Gori would smoke it because they believe it would be their way of communicating with the gods. Zoroastrians also did the same thing, that they would put it on their incense burners with opium and they'd sit there and inhale the fumes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, cannabis used to be used throughout every bit of culture. Jesus would have used it for sure. He would have rubbed it in his skin and rubbed it on the people that were sick. They most likely took magic mushrooms as well. Like a lot of people did, and that's how they got the visions. And if you look at Gnostics, they mentioned all the visions were mostly dreams. So they were very honest in their writings. They even called some of their writings myths, where other Christian groups, that's all fact, you have to believe this. So they were pretty knowledgeable in a sense. That was too good for their error, I would say, in a sense, That's why they were ultimately persecuted off. Anyone that's sort of got those sort of ideals of peace and love are usually persecuted, There's like even different forms of Buddhism. You have some that will go to war and some that reject it. All different branches of every religion.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I guess the peaceful ones will kind of succumb to the war.
Yes, but we're starting to get smarter. The more we evolve, so does empathy. So eventually we're going to evolve into that state of more compassion. We're mostly just guided by primitive instincts, primitive emotions. And
Mhm.
a lot of the faults is to do with one's in charge, and it's always been like that, unfortunately. That's why we kind of need a community-based government sense. And if we had that back then, wow, imagine how much we would have advanced, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, yeah, we're coming up on an hour or a little past an hour.
Yeah, just noticed
Any,
that. Good chat.
yeah. So, any final thoughts or anything that we didn't cover that you want to cover?
I'm very, very happy with, man. Like, Liv, for the next interview, you have any other questions, I'll happily ask. You know, I love sharing stuff. It's beautiful, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love the interaction with the people watching with the questions and whatnot. Yeah, like the tie-in to Shiva and cannabis, right, and religion, right. So it's interesting, right, especially where we have the cannabis receptors in the brain. It's weird that
It's a part
we
of our body, yes. And that's why
evolved
when people
to that,
start
or
smoking, they
isn't
get
that weird?
addicted to it because the serotonin is already in their body, in a sense. So,
Yeah,
yeah. And even DMT is within us. So we carry an illegal drug.
yeah. Alan Watts, right, says
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. A couple
That,
others as well. But yeah, but DMT is a very, very ancient thing. And it's within all
Yeah.
life itself. It's a code of creation, you know?
yeah. Alan Watts says it's hard to legalize it when everybody's holding or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can unlock it naturally just by meditation, your own breath work. You don't have to have a drug. You can, as I said, unlock it naturally. I've done it a couple of times myself, and it's awesome. I've had the drug before myself, and there's no real difference. The only difference is if you're going to have the substance, you're probably going to have a little bit of a sweat, and you'll just see it instantly. But if you're meditating, you build it up, and the meditation is much more cleaner. You know, you can intoxicate yourself with your own breath. Right?
Mhm.
People have been doing this for many years. You know. But also meditation, you're probably going to get a more healthier experience, you know,
Yep.
in a sense, you know. But yeah,
Yep.
because
Very
it's
true.
yours.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. And
No worries,
thank
Elliot.
everybody for
Peace and
watching.
love.
So, yep. And check out Spiritual Level of Being. That's Nathan's channel. And like, subscribe. And as I say, also dislike if you want to. That helps. And in the comments, you know, if you want to get into a flame war, that also helps with interaction too. So that's good. All right. All right.
Awesome.
So thank you, everybody. Have an
Battery's about
awesome
to
day.
die too, so that's good timing. Peace
How's
and love,
that?
Elliot. Oh, my phone's about. Oh, my computer's about to die too, so it's great timing.
There we go. It was meant to be, right?
Peace
All
and
right.
love, brother.
Yep.
Peace and love.
Yeah.